What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Week 1 DFS MVP podcast. I'm your host, TJ Hernandez, the director of DFS at 4for4.com with my co-hosts, John Daigle and Mr. Pat Crane. If you were here last year, you know Daigle. If you missed the preseason show, you might be a little surprised by the new face, Mr. Pat Crane, but you probably know him. He's the founder of Legendary Upside. He is the co-host of Ship Chasing, formerly of NBC Sports, and most famously, the winner of Best Ball Mania 3. If you guys are regular podcast listeners, probably noticed it's a little early this week. That's because Daigle and Crane are going to be crushing souls in Vegas. Got a few more high stakes things to take care of this week. So we're on Wednesday. For the rest of the year, we will be on Friday back at our normal time. But it's week 1, so everything's a little crazy. Crane, what's up, buddy? Before we get into it, tell us a little bit about Legendary Upside and what you guys got going on over there. You're on mute, Corinne.
Oh, look at that.
It's week 1. It's week 1. That's
week
what
one.
debut.
It's week 1.
Roaring stuff.
Yeah. Legendary Upside. Have a bunch of preseason content, including the legendary running back scenarios. If you're still drafting, definitely good to look at that. And I'll be doing a preview column. The first one will come out next week, doing a game-by-game preview of the NFL Sunday and Monday, and diving into basically what I think will happen. So I think very useful for a DFS perspective, although it's not like purely a DFS article.
Yeah, those game previews, we will probably be talking about a lot here every single week. As I mentioned, we're a little early this week, but next week we'll have a full slate of games under our belt, have a 2023 data to talk about, so we'll definitely be touching on those. Daigle, how you doing this week, bud?
Doing well. We will have all our articles, as you mentioned last week, on the site for everyone by Saturday morning. Given my schedule, I may make you wake up Friday morning and at least put the rough draft out there for everyone. And then I'll update it after a few martinis Saturday morning. So we'll see how everything goes, but we'll have everything.
Listen, anybody ever telling me an article is going to be an early article is music to my editor's ears. So I love to hear that. As you guys, if you guys have been listening to DFS MVP before, you know it's always been a two-man show with Corinne, with his game-by-game knowledge. We're going to try a little bit of a different format this year. We'll be going way more in deep to the games, just to the slate in general, giving you guys cash game spins, large field GPP spins, small field GPP spins, everything we could fit into this show. And speaking of GPPs, one of the big announcements this week is 4for4 has partnered up with the Solver. A lot of people have been asking us for a lot of upgrades on the lineup generator at 4for4, especially large field tournament players or small field tournament players. And rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, we partnered up with one of the best, I think is the best lineup optimizer in the game. So if you are a 4for4 DFS or betting sub, you have the option to upgrade to the Solver. We will still have the option for the basic lineup generator on 4for4, but if you want all those advanced features, advanced tools, managing your exposure, all of that great stuff that you could do for a GPP lineup generator, you will have the option to upgrade to that. And if you haven't got a DFS or betting subscription yet, use the promo code YouTube to save 25% at 4for4.com/plans. Link to both of those options, both the Solver and to sign up for 4for4, are in the YouTube description. So make sure you get signed up for that. Lots of cool stuff coming with the Solver. They're working on some sim stuff as we speak too. So that should be really exciting. But let's get right into it. We won't go through every game today, but we will go over the biggest games. We have a couple potential shootouts. We have a few teams with some very, not very high totals. Actually, it's a pretty low total slate, but relatively high totals. And then we will talk about any games that we missed and just some general thoughts on the slate before we get into our player picks. But let's start with the most likely potential shootout on the main slate. Dolphins are at the Chargers. Chargers favored by 3, 51 point over, the only game on the main slate with a over-under of at least 50 points. Chargers with a 27-point implied total. Dolphins with a 24-point implied total. This is a late kickoff, the latest kickoff, so it's always interesting to have the shootout of the week in the latest window, 4:25 p.m. kickoff. Daigle, because of this high over compared to the rest of the slate. This game probably carries the most ownership, but it also is a game that is probably going to take up a lot of salaries. So just talk about your angles on this game and your early thoughts on it.
A fun game, not only because it's where a lot of people are going to have their bags packed in tournaments, but I think it's really interesting because I think I'll probably be one of the few pouring a little cold water on it. Remember, last year, Justin Herbert, or the last 2 years, 25th and 36th in depth of target. And I understand the reports coming out of camp or that Kellen Moore is now having him throw deep. My issue is that depth of target has never been an offensive coordinator thing. It's never been a quarterback thing. It's usually just been the players the quarterback sees when they look up. Depth of target is a wide receiver stat, and nothing changed over the offseason. Right. Quentin Johnson was one of the nation's worst deep ball and contested catch targets. He is big Brandon Ayuk. He averaged 8.9 yards after the catch per reception in college for a reason, because they dumped the ball off to him underneath or over the middle of the field, and he gets yards after the catch. And that's the only change with this offense. And we don't even know how much he's going to play, given that Josh Palmer, and I believe this report, is working ahead of him in 3 wide sets. Not to mention that at TCU, Quentin Johnson ran 90% of his routes from the boundary. In the preseason, he ran 93% of his routes from the boundary. He doesn't come in and like take away from Keenan Allen, nor does he take away from Mike Williams. In 3 wide sets, he'd be on the outside. And so I think that's where Josh Palmer probably earns like a BC Johnson over Justin Jefferson in 2020. That first like 3 or 4 game runway until they finally say, you got first round capital, you get in here instead. On the other side of the ball, though, remember, Josh Boyer, defensive coordinator for the Dolphins last year, blitzed at the league's 3rd highest rate. Now we have Vic Fangio. It's an entirely different defense. Fangio is basically the reason why football became less fun to watch. He practically invented 2 high safeties, which limits big plays and thus limits explosiveness on offenses. So I understand like the talent on both sides of the ball. It's going to get steamed a lot. But honestly, there's enough nuance on both sides to where I maybe go skinny stack or pick my targets. Austin Eckler, as I mentioned, because of this 2 high safety defense that I think Vic Fangio will be able to limit the Chargers offense with, instead of going all the way in.
Yeah, we have 2 really different teams just from a DFS perspective. I think we're really going to be able to understand where the ownership's going, because Miami is so concentrated between Tyreek and Waddle, whereas the Chargers, their passing game can be very spread out, but they have arguably the best overall running back play on the slate, also the highest price running back on the slate. So those are the players that are easy to go to in terms of projection, but it also sets up maybe some pretty obvious pivots. So, Pat, thoughts on this game, thoughts on some possible pivots off of what should be the chalky plays in this game?
Yeah, I mean, when pricing first came out, a month or so ago, and I was going to look and see what was fun, this is immediately where I went. I was like, God, it's tough. Do I play this through Herbert or do I play it through Tua? That was the real decision point. But I think it's such an obvious game for people to go to, and I agree. It's very easy to feel comfortable with playing it from the Miami side. You've got Eckler. It's sort of obvious to see where people are going to go with it. If you're going to fade one of these really exciting game environments, and I do think it's an exciting game environment, I think it's a very fun game environment, you want a clear way for it to fail. And the Chargers were kind of the team last year that like figured out the Miami stuff. So I don't know, McDaniels had a whole offseason to try to come up with a counterpunch, but if Miami's not who we're hoping this year, like this would be a game that would tell us that. So, it's definitely plausible that this game just isn't quite as fun as we're hoping. I think a lot of what Daigle said as well about the Miami side of this matters as well. So if I'm going to play pieces of this game, I want to make sure they're a little less popular. Sure. Mostert jumps out to me as a potential pivot.
Yeah, I love Mostert. Chargers, for the last few years, have kind of been that classic run funnel defense. Obviously, things do change on defense year to year, but that does stand out. Another thing, I mean, really early in the offseason, I write these regression articles. the two players that really stood out in the passing game were Justin Herbert and Tua Tagovailoa. Tua had a insanely high touchdown rate last year. Obviously, Waddle and Tyreek are his main targets there. They both also really scored even above their own expected mean, whereas Justin Herbert was way below expectation. So if we see early regression as we expect, or at least as I expect, maybe things are flipped on their head a little bit there. You guys kind of covered the other points I was thinking about in terms of Herbert with his apparently higher Johnson versus Palmer. I agree with Daigle there that Palmer probably plays a little bit more. I think the one interesting thing that we never just found last year is like, does Miami have a third option? Last year it was like, oh, Gesicki's going to be, he's this basically a wide receiver. That never came to fruition. Now is it like Braxton Berrios just like all of a sudden getting these random 10 targets and being a PPR guy? I don't know if that happens. My intuition would be that it just still stays super concentrated between the two receivers, and the running backs get a little bit more involved this year.
And when Tua was on the field, Tyreek Hill dominated Waddle in targets. Yeah. It was not 1A, 1B. It was Tyreek freaking Hill, 32.5% target share to Waddle's 22.7%. So again, I could see myself squeezing in because the overall thesis of this slate is that you can do whatever the hell you want. There are so many concentrated prices at minimum salary at different positions that you can really afford to spend up. So I could see myself going Tyreek, Eckler. And given that, at least for this week, it may change in week 2, but at least for this week, I'm going to be a little bit friendlier to myself. Maybe it's also because I'm going to therapy, but I'm being a little friendlier to myself and allowing myself more allocated salary, given that the plays are going to be overused and over rostered because they're good plays, because they are mispriced. That's okay. I don't mind eating that salary, at least for week 1, where we concentrate on players. And that includes Tyreek Hill and Austin Eckler together.
Yeah, that was kind of the point I was going to make, whether it be Hill and Eckler or Hill and Waddle. I think people, when they do start building, again, we're recording this on Wednesday, when people start building Friday, Saturday night, early Sunday morning, they're going to realize how easy it is to either double the Dolphins or play Tyreek and Eckler together. And I think ownership probably gets I think tomorrow when I do my first runner projections, it'll be moderate because it's week 1 and we're still trying to figure out what the temperature of the community is. I think by Sunday, when people realize how easy it is to build these lineups, that it's going to be like Tyreek approaching like 30% or something like that. Only one other game on the slate has a game total of at least 47 points. That's Bengals at the Browns. Bengals favored by 2.5, 25-point team total, 22.5-point team total for the Browns. This is an early game. Corinne, as I mentioned, this is the only other game with not even a total over 47, a total over 46. This is a huge slate. So when we have these really big slates and two games that are obviously supposed to score a lot more than the rest, how concentrated do you typically find yourself on just two games like this? And the two players that are really popping in this game in terms of value are Joe Mixon and Jamar Chase. Do you see yourself getting away from those guys, or are they chalk because the offense should just really concentrate on the Bengals' obvious players?
Yeah, I don't think I'll get completely away from both of these games. I want to be involved in this game. I like Mixon and Chase. I think just from Burrow, dealing with this calf injury, the dump down angle to Mixon could be interesting. I'm also kind of curious, does he get played more on third downs? Does he get used a little bit more as a receiver? I'm not really drafting like that in my preseason stuff, but I certainly think it's possible. And, with the calf injury, this would be maybe one of his better receiving opportunities of the season. So if he's going to have a bigger role over the course of the year, I think we would see it right away. And then from the other side, if the Browns are going to take a step forward and Watson's going to be, what we thought he was or what he used to be, then we would find out this week, I think. So I'm kind of intrigued by Browns stuff with Bengals bringbacks. If I'm doing a Browns double with Mixon coming back or Browns double with Chase, and I think there's three options that you have on the Browns side as pass catchers. You could really even say four options, because I think DPJ, Elijah Moore, and Njoku, and Amari Cooper all look kind of interesting. So I think there's a few different ways you could play this from the Browns side. A couple of different really strong bring back options, and I don't know that's going to catch the same level of chalk as the Chargers Dolphins game. So it's kind of an interesting pivot in what could be a really high scoring game.
Yeah, I do think despite the second highest game total on the slate, I do think it could get overshadowed because there are a few teams that have higher team totals than the Bengals. And obviously, if we're talking about shootout games, Dolphins, Chargers is the bigger one. Daigle, this game, when I first saw it, I was a little surprised by the spread. I thought Bengals would be favored by a little bit more. What are we seeing that might suggest that this game is close, that maybe the Browns are better than expected? Is it the passing game? Is it just the Nick Chubb show? Are we overlooking? Karain mentioned DPJ, and the Browns being a little bit deeper on passing offense than we thought. How are you looking at this thing?
I just like games and situations where if it goes right, also the target tree is honed in. And that's what I love about this situation where, one, if it goes right for Deshaun Watson, he already averaged, I know it was bad results, but the 6th most carries per game among all running backs, or 8th most carries per game among all quarterbacks last year, 6 per game. And the results weren't there, obviously. Career low touchdown rate, roughly 2 fewer yards per attempt than he averaged with the Texans. And it was the first time in his career that he averaged less than 20 fantasy points per game, and he averaged 14.3. All those stats were so wonky that I can easily just throw them out and say, let's bet on it all coming back and let's be bullish on this offense. And if that's the case, we get a rushing quarterback who, I know, Karain, you mentioned quite a few players, but for game strategy purposes, Elijah Moore at 3,800 in particular on DraftKings is the only one checking in around roughly 20%. It's only Wednesday. It could change. But I think that tells me I'd much rather whittle it down to Amari Cooper and David Njoku. Amari Cooper, who still led the team in targets last year from Watson. Again, the results weren't there, but the opportunity was there. And then David Njoku, everyone remembers George Kittle ending lives with those 5 receiving scores over the last month of the season. But Njoku and Kittle were the only 2 tight ends to see 40% of their team's red zone targets in that span. So Njoku was getting targets where it matters most. So I think we can easily double stack those 2 guys with Watson if it all goes well. Not to mention, we don't expect Elijah Moore to play primarily in 2 wide sets, at least to start the year, given DPJ doesn't play the slot at all. So we can just take him off the field at 20% ownership too. Then you go to the other side of the ball and even more whittled down target tree than last year. If Chase and T. Higgins hit, if we have a rushing quarterback in Watson, I really don't feel like I need Burrow. Like, I just feel like if Chase and Higgins hit, all of them get there. And I can still take the rushing quarterback. Even Hayden Hurst, like, say what you want about him. Before his concussion in the second half of the season or his ankle injury, he was averaging 5.5 targets per game. And now we have to remove that for Irv Smith, who, I know the depth chart says 24 years old, but his knee is 44 years old. It doesn't matter. So I just like the fact that we already have this game whittled down to 6 ceiling players, and we can just parse them together. So it's a situation I love.
Yeah, we kind of have a bit of a cluster in like the 65 to 6,800 range at running back with Mixon, Dobbins, and Alexander Mattison. But as far as like models are going, it looks like Mixon is popping the most. So if Mixon ends up being like, I don't know, like a 15 to 20% ownership guy, and we get Chubb on the other side at sub 10%, I think that's going to be a super interesting pivot on that side. Obviously, Chubb way more expensive, probably going to get caught a little bit in no man's land with him being basically the same price as Eckler. So Chubb could be a very interesting contrarian play in this game, again, depending on how ownership shakes out. One reason I think this game can get overlooked quite a bit, not just because of the Dolphins game, but it's going off at the same time as the Ravens. Ravens have one of the higher team totals on the slate, favored by 10. Before we got on here, Daigle, you were asking me about Lamar possibly being the cash game quarterback. We'll get into a little bit more a bit later, but that question alone makes us think that Lamar himself will be quite popular. If he is someone that we're using in tournaments, we can pretty easily, assuming that Andrews' injury isn't anything to worry about. Andrews is the obvious stack option, but that's also a very expensive stack. The big question with the Ravens is this ambiguous wide receiver core. Is there anybody in week 1 between Bateman, OBJ and Zay Flowers that stand out to you to pair with Lamar?
I don't know the extent of how often Zay Flowers will play in 2 wide sets, but honestly, given that even in the preseason, they were giving him concerted targets, I think he's the one I trust the most right now. We didn't see much, if any, of Odell Beckham. Rashad Bateman, of course, we haven't seen much at all in the last 2 years. And so it just seems like a situation where they roll out the red carpet and get Flowers involved early on. That's where I go. Like, but Karain, do you have any other pivot thoughts? Because it's obviously an offense everyone's going to lean on. And then TJ, we can talk about J.K. Dobbins too.
Yeah, definitely.
My general feeling is that people have been sleeping on Bateman, who, is supposed to be healthy. He said he feels back to normal. He had the screw removed early in training camp. It meant he didn't really get any playing time throughout the process. And so I don't know. If I was going to do like something like really large field, he's a little interesting to me, but he's the most expensive of the 3 wide receivers. And I get that it feels like a shot in the dark. So he won't be a part of anything I'm trying to do in kind of the normal smaller field stuff. And I have plenty of exposure in my season long stuff. So I don't feel the need to force that. I guess generally, like, I don't love this spot for the Ravens, especially if people are going to be on it. I'm really excited about the Ravens this year, but I think given the matchup with the Texans, who aren't, I don't think, going to push them, right? And it could be, they score some points through the air, but it's spread out, and then they go to the running game, and maybe we can just kind of use this as like an information gathering week on the Ravens if the field is going to be all over Lamar.
Right tackle Titus Howard and starting center Drew Scruggs for the Texans as well are on injured reserve. That's another huge concern here, is that I keep trying to figure out, like, how do we run it back? How do we get pushed back for the Ravens? And like, I can't get there. I can't figure anything out.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that stands out to me is that Houston was the biggest run funnel defense in the league last year. Now, a lot of that had to do with just people were just rolling them, and you don't have to pass it at some point against this team. But it might just be exactly the same this year, especially in week 1 where the Ravens are favored by 10. I mean, the concern is exactly what Karain said. Like, do the Texans even push the Ravens? And I'm not somebody that is often going to say, oh well, this is going to be a blowout, so I'm not playing the passing game, because a lot of times the passing game is what gets you to that blowout. But this isn't Patrick Mahomes. This isn't Josh Allen, where 5 touchdowns are going to come for the passing game. 1 touchdown might come from Mar's legs. A couple of those touchdowns come from Dobbins. And all of a sudden we really are in a situation where this offense needs to be pushed for the passing game to get there. So, I mean, a couple of questions for both of you guys. One, Dobbins is projecting worse than Mattison and Mixon at basically the same salary. Is he the play in this game? And 2, if we are stacking this game, like, is there a Texan to bring back? I don't see one.
I don't really see a Texan either. I was very optimistic about Nico Collins early in the offseason as kind of a late round dart throw, but he got kind of steamed up in best ball stuff, and people, I think, are expecting him to kind of be the clear top wide receiver, but I'm not sure that he is. Like, I think he probably is, but I don't really have the confidence. But I guess he would be probably the most obvious bring back, but I don't really want to play any Texans. So
I agree.
Yeah, Dobbins and get out of there, I think, is kind of interesting. It's going to be tough to project Dobbins accurately, I think. Like, we didn't see any of him. There was this whole holdout or hold-in situation that then was resolved. And, obviously he didn't look right all last year, even though he was actually pretty efficient. So how much work is he going to get? How efficient is he going to be? It's all kind of up in the air. I do kind of like that Gus Edwards seems to have maybe fallen behind Justice Hill. Like, Justice Hill is going to be a passing down back. He's not, I don't think, going to be like eating into Dobbins' work. So if Gus Edwards has fallen out of favor a little bit, maybe that's a good sign for J.K. Dobbins' ability to consolidate rushing work.
Yeah, I just remain so skeptical right now on beat reports because, again, the way players play the game doesn't change just because you get a new offensive coordinator. We've done this too long. Like, I can't believe it's still a storyline. And so when all the reports out of camp are, oh, Todd Monken's using the running backs, it's like the Ravens haven't been not passing to running backs because of Greg Roman. It's because Lamar Jackson. Like, he's not that kind of player, just like Josh Allen. The Ravens been bottom 4 in the league in all 4 seasons that Lamar Jackson have played in running back target rate. So it's one of those situations where maybe it burns me, but I think we have enough options here to pay down at running back and around J.K. Dobbins where I don't mind being left behind. And again, maybe that burns me, but I really just, I don't know yet how I'm going to play it. I'm still trying to figure it out on Wednesday.
Yeah, specifically on DK, the answer might just be Ravens defense. Washington is going to get 1,000,000% ownership at sub 3K. Ravens are priced way up, and as we talked about, this is one of those slates where you are going to be able to pay for some stuff that you usually wouldn't pay for. We usually aren't paying 4K for a defense on DK. If we get a 10-point favorite, even if they're 15% owned compared to 35 or 40% owned, like, sign me up, right?
I listened to our friends Drew Dinkmeyer and Mike Leone, and Dink, who is literally one of the best DFS players in the game, in the world. That's what he mentioned. That's where he said he thinks DFS is going. Now, like in 2023, we should be saying, looking at the ownership percentage, not looking and saying that's low, I want it, but looking at the ownership percentage, whatever it is, and saying that's off. Like, where should it be?
Right.
And in this case, that's the perfect way to phrase it, TJ, is Washington's going to be 30 to 40%, if not higher. So even if the Ravens are 20%, and they won't be, but even if they're 20%, where should they be, especially in comparison to a 40% defense? So that's the exact way to look at it.
I was worried you were saying that Dink was saying we need to pay up for defense every week. And I don't know. That doesn't sound fun.
Shoot, we might have to at some point just to be different. Another big spread, but this one is weird to me. Vikings favored by 6, team total just under 26 points, 45.5 point total against the Buccaneers early game. Pat, when I first saw slates come out, I was just looking at these spreads, looking at the projected workload for Mattison, looking at what they did in the backfield, and I thought Mattison's probably going to be that mid-tier running back popping in the models. He isn't. It's Joe Mixon that's popping in all the models at that price range. Last year, the Buccaneers were one of the most obvious pass funnels in the league. Is Mattison not popping because this is going to be the Justin Jefferson show and maybe Addison's coming out party? Or is this a little bit of a trap game?
Yeah, I think this could be a little bit of a trap game. One of the things that I look at is, pass rate over expected for the walkthrough when I'm doing the game-by-game preview stuff. But I started last year looking at pass rate over expected, which, accounts for game situation and then whether teams are passing more or less than you would think for, 1st and 10, long down and distance, that type of stuff. But I was also looking at like a team's expected pass rate and then what they were doing relative to expectations, because some teams like the Bengals and the Chiefs and the Bills are in game situations generally where they're not expected to pass and they pass a ton, but they're essentially dictating pass heavy game scripts to their opponents. Right. And then you have some teams that are like dictating the run to their opponents, like the Eagles last year. Like, they were so good. They were like creating run heavy game environments because they were so good. You have teams like the Falcons and the Bears that are like, we're just going to run and we don't care what the situation is. And then there were teams like the Vikings and the Buccaneers last year who were not generally in good game situations, but were willing to pass and try to keep up with their opponents and basically kind of, play to win, even though they weren't all that good. And I'm worried now, like the Bucs, I don't know if that's going to be their philosophy. I think we could see them being much more conservative, much more like the Panthers were last year, when they had Baker Mayfield. It's like, and or the Seahawks, which is, where their offensive coordinator comes from. So it's a situation where if the Buccaneers aren't going to be pushing the Vikings to the air, and the Vikings were largely pushed to the air by other teams last year, I don't know if they're going to want to get into this pass heavy game environment. I think they have a lean to the pass, but they're more kind of closer to balanced, I think, at baseline. So, I think Mattison is kind of interesting. He's not a guy that I like at all for season long stuff, but it's because like I don't think he's that good, And I'm skeptical that he's able to control the backfield for an entire season. But I think he can control the backfield this week, and there could be quite a bit of rushing for the Vikings to do this week.
We are not lockstep in playing Mattison. I don't necessarily know how to handle it just yet, but I've been getting bad vibes from the Vikings offense. Like all they did this offseason was give TJ Hawkinson the highest contract ever for a tight end and give Josh Oliver, the tight end, $21 million 3-year deal in free agency. That almost screams more 12 personnel. And at least in the first couple of games, as Jordan Addison was injured for a lot of the preseason, I don't necessarily know if that means he's going to be in 2 wide sets. That could still be KJ Osborne at the beginning of the year. So I am pretty lukewarm on Jordan Addison, at least out the gates. Of course, I think he's going to emerge eventually. Yeah. But right now, I think Justin Jefferson is as safe as it comes. If the Bucs score any points, which I also have my doubts about.
Yeah, definitely have my doubts about that there too. Like Corinne said, I do think this is a spot where they could slow it down. I'm on Mattison, as we'll talk about a little bit later, but models, both FanDuel and DraftKings, we actually have Rachaad White popping as a better value than Mattison. One thing that was very well known at the end of last year that people might have forgotten going into this year is that the Vikings just ran perfectly pure in 1-score games. And a lot of that turned into, obviously a good record and better game script than expected. So that is another reason why, if that luck runs out starting this week, I could see this being the upset of the week. And if that happens, it's probably in a 20-17 game or something like that.
I still like Rachaad White too. I don't know, over Mattison or trying to figure it out, maybe skinny stacks, but I would take Rachaad White over Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. At least we don't think there's any competition. Like the big reports early right now are Sean Tucker, an undrafted free agent, getting RB2 work on early down. So that's fine. I don't care about Rachaad White's early down. He was bad at that anyway. So we care about a 98th percentile athlete who, again, you only removed last year playing next to Leonard Fournette, who had an 18.9% target share in college. That's what we care about. So I still really don't mind taking a chance here, thinking there's no competition for Rachaad White and playing him at single-digit ownership.
I like that call too.
I like that. Yeah, me too. There's only one other team on the entire slate with a team total of at least 25 points. That's the Seahawks, favored by 5.5 against the Rams, total of 25.75. Game total only 46. Rams without Cooper Kupp, all of a sudden, maybe one of the worst rosters in the league, especially on the defensive side, like we talked about again before we hopped on here, Dago. This is a game that we were super excited about a week and a half ago. Now with no Cooper Kupp, what does this game shake out like? One thing I do like about it, it's the same time as Miami and LA, so there's a lot of late swap ability. The tough thing about it, depending on, at least from an ease of projection standpoint, is we got notice today that Jackson Smith and Jigbo will be active, so that muddies up the target share a little bit, or does it not muddy up the target share?
I still think he may be limited, at least early out the gates. Like, I'm not counting him as a player in season longs where I'm flexing, or I don't think he'll make an impact in week 1. I could be wrong. I still would like to consider the target share really honed in. More importantly, though, we thought this game could be hot because both Jamaal Adams and Devin Witherspoon are out this week. So we just thought, okay, we can get everyone through the air, but we need Cooper Kupp. And now we don't have Cooper Kupp. That's why I go right back to Kenneth Walker, who's going to be 20% rostered, but I may just play him anyhow. I may just throw him right to the Rams because it doesn't seem like a situation where any Rams can make plays here. We'll probably get Tyler Higbee. It looks like Tutu Atwell will probably be an option for everyone because he's a stone min on DraftKings, even though he averaged 2.5 fewer PPR points per game than Van Jefferson last year, in the last 7 games when they overlapped. Van Jefferson also only played 16 routes with Matthew Stafford, but he was targeted on 5 of them. So I do like the little spend-up corollary on Van Jefferson on DraftKings over Tutu Atwell just to get a little bit of exposure there. But overall, I don't know where we get our pushback for Seattle's offense. That's what makes me worried, Corinne.
Yeah, I don't see much pushback. I like the Kenneth Walker call quite a bit. Tutu Atwell would be the guy that I would be most interested in just because of the price. But if everyone's going to go there, I mean, he is like 5'6" or something, 155 pounds.
Let's just ignore it. Even ignore his size. He's Tutu Atwell. How about that? If everyone's going to go there, he's just Tutu Atwell.
Yeah, he's Tutu Atwell. So yeah. I don't think I want to play Van Jefferson either. I mean, Tyler Higbee, I think, is kind of interesting, but it seems like maybe people are going to be on that a little bit. If no one wanted to play him, I definitely would. But I mean, even like moderate chalk on Tyler Higbee, I think I'm looking elsewhere. But
right.
Yeah, I think Walker is the most interesting piece of this game.
Yeah. The only thing that sucks about Higbee is he's in like an awkward salary range on both sides. So that's always kind of funky to deal with. Like mid fives on FanDuel, I believe, and just under 5K on DraftKings. That's always a weird tight end salary. This is one of those spots where you have to get away from your priors a little bit. I was one of the few in the industry that was JSN over Tyler Lockett all offseason and thought just a ton of 3 wide receiver sets from Seattle with JSN on the team now. When a rookie misses basically half of the preseason, I think you got to pull back on that a little bit. I do think eventually that happens, but I agree. Week 1, if I am touching the receivers, just Lockett and DK. Probably a little bit of growing pains now with JSN missing some of the preseason. But I mean, I agree. Like, go ahead, Grant.
Well, I was going to float the Seahawks defense here.
Yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't even know what they're priced at, to be honest.
I think 3,300 on DK.
So
that's a good.
400,
that's
400
a good
more on
point.
DK.
Yeah, 3,300.
500 more.
Yeah, that is a really great pivot. Yeah, we don't really have a lot of like the defense are appropriately priced on DK, really on both sides outside of the Commanders. Everyone else is more or less appropriately priced. So 3,300 is still pretty cheap. Yeah, that's a really good call there. And like I'm just like team fade chalk min priced wide receivers in general. So I think like Tutu is about as good as a chalk fade as we can get.
Plus there are, as we'll talk about in a bit, like so many min chalk plays this week. And the other 2, I think, have very good reason to be played, not Tutu.
Yeah, I agree. And we will get to those in segment part 2. Those are the obvious games. Those are the games that people are going to be talking about all week. The highest team totals, the highest implied totals of the week. Pat, is there another game that pops to you just for any reason at all?
Broncos Raiders, I think, is pretty interesting because we're going to get, I think, a lot of information on both offenses, right? With the Raiders, it's basically like, how bad is Jimmy G going to be for this offense and for these weapons? And then for the Broncos, I mean, we have the bigger question of, can Russell be saved by Sean Payton coming in here? But last year, the Raiders were so bad against the pass. They were just, anyone could pick on them. I actually am probably lower on Kenny Pickett than I should be because he didn't take advantage of this matchup late in the season. It's like, I just like every quarterback who came up against the Raiders, you really had a chance to light them up. And I don't think they'll be that much better this year. So this is kind of the spot where if Russell Wilson is going to be like meaningfully better than he was last season, I think we'll see it this week. And, who knows? Maybe he won't be. He's older. His game's kind of maybe not suited for the too high stuff and all of that. But if it's going to happen this year, I think this week we could get a really nice game out of him. I know he's dealing with his receivers, dealing with injuries, and that's going to make the probability lower that he hits. But it also, I think, makes it a little easier to figure out who to play. Like you can play Sutton, you can play Mims. If Mims ends up getting real steamy, that's going to be disappointing. Yeah. I think though he's going to
be top 5 owned player.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so too. I think
he's stone men in 2 wide sets, assuming Jerry Jeudy's out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that would actually make it less appealing, but I think Davante Adams is really appealing this game. I think in larger field stuff, I would be willing to mix in Dulcich.
There it is. Again, I was going to bring it up.
Just, if everyone's out, right? Judy's out. Yeah. Like if he's there, Gesicki, that's not that fun, but it's more fun if all their wide receivers are hurt. So that's just a game environment where it's probably more for larger field stuff, but I could see it happening just because of how juicy this matchup is for the Broncos offense.
I want to tag team this because I was thinking the same thing. Don't know how I'm going to play it just yet. I love Davante Adams. Right now, we have him checking in around 8 to 10%. We'll see if that gets steamed at all. But Davante Adams single digit is hot in this game. Mm-hmm. But the top 5 offenses to end their drives with points last year were exactly who you thought. The Chiefs, Bills, Eagles, Lions, and the Raiders, except those other 4 offenses finished top 4 scoring a touchdown at the end of those drives, whereas the Raiders finished 10th because they were second overall in kicking field goals. Like usually that type of scoring rate tends to regress year to year. They were 26th in red zone touchdown rate. And so we know their offense was good last year based on those stats. They just couldn't punch it in. And so if that's the case, we now have like Davante Adams here sitting at single-digit ownership after he was one of only 2 wide receivers, Tyreek Hill being the other, who accounted for 30% of his team's targets. Even with the quarterback change, like Adams is a player, if we think this is going to be a higher scoring environment, that I absolutely want to get on. So, yes, I agree. I don't know how to play it just yet. Maybe it is Mims. Maybe it's Cortland Sutton. Either way, though, I love Adams in this game environment.
Davante Adams within $300 of both Tyreek Hill and Jamar Chase. Keenan Allen also just $300 below Adams in a game that people are going to be trying to find ways to get unique. I can see Adams coming in at like 3 or 4%. Again, I'm not running my first run of ownership till tomorrow, but I could easily see Adams sub 5% this week.
I mean, I'd have to play him. I'd have to die for all of us.
Another player within $300 of Adams. I'm sorry, Keenan Allen's within $600 Adams, but another player within $300 of Adams is AJ Brown, and not a lot of people are talking about the Eagles this week, at least not yet. Daigle,
buddy, I'm so excited about this game because it just seems like regression for everyone happening the moment the gates open. Eagles played at the fastest pace in the NFL in the first half of games last year. Also averaged 17.5 pass attempts per game in the first half. Then the second half came around and they trailed for the lowest rate of plays in the league and averaged only 11.5 pass attempts per game in the final 2 quarters because they played the league's easiest schedule. They just padded leads and ran the ball in the second half. We haven't seen the Eagles been pushed. We haven't seen Jalen Hurts ceiling. And now we think we're going to get that because the Patriots last year, if you just look at the raw stats, 3rd in EPA on defense. But no one will tell you that they went 8-0 against rookies and backup quarterbacks and allowed just 10 points per game against those spare players. Whereas anytime they played, even a relevant starter. So I'm doing math in my head right now, 9 games in their schedule, they allowed 29 points per game, which would have been a league high mark. Also, so bad if you look at Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, the rushing quarterbacks they played last year, just allowed them to run all over them. So I think we get a Jalen Hurts ceiling performance. And given the changes that happen for the Patriots offense, that's where I think we get a lot of points scored in this total overall. Last year, think about how long Belichick has coached the Patriots, 22 seasons. And that was his first time last year that they averaged less than 61 plays per game. And they averaged only 59. Not to mention, if you say the Patriots don't have a ceiling with Mac Jones, you're wrong. Because we're only 1 year removed from that offense finishing 9th and 7th in points and yards per drive with Mac Jones as a rookie. So given Bill Bryan now under center and what we believe is a concerted target tree, like we're looking at only 3-4 guys here. Like the confident ones really are Ramondre Stevenson, Devontae Parker, and Hunter Henry, not even including Juju Smith-Schuster. So I think we can actually whittle this down to maybe 1 or 2 players we really like on the Patriots for their ceiling outcome and double stack a home target tree from Jalen Hurts. And that just seems like such an awesome thing to do with all checking in below 10%.
Yeah, we already talked about Lamar Jackson in that early game. We know that probably Sam Howell is going to be the cheap quarterback. The quarterbacks in the Chargers and Dolphins game are going to draw some ownership. Like, there's only so much ownership to go around. Throw Joe Burrow in there. I mean, Jalen Hurts might just be the 6th, 7th highest owned quarterback on the slate, on a slate where we don't have Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. That seems pretty egregious. The one spot that go ahead. Yeah.
No, it does. I'm excited to play Hurts now.
The one spot that I'm looking at, I mean, everybody's talking about the Cardinals and the Texans being the 2 worst teams in the league. I mean, the team that is the most in shambles right now is the Indianapolis Colts. I think they have a chance to have one of the worst records in the league. I know there's a ton of hype around Anthony Richardson and his fantasy outlook. But on both sides of the ball, I think their team is pretty bad, especially on the defensive side of the ball. A lot of models, because of Richardson's rushing ability, are going to show Anthony Richardson popping as one of the best values of the week. The Jaguars are the team that's favored. The Jaguars are the quarterback that has a chance to step into the elite ranks. He has a fantastic, Trevor Lawrence has a fantastic pass catching core with Calvin Ridley healthy. Jaguars are going to go overlooked this week, especially playing the same time as Lamar. I think Anthony Richardson could be higher owned than Trevor Lawrence. I'm all over the Jaguars passing game. Don't know how I'm going to stack them yet. Obviously, Calvin Ridley is a guy that everybody's excited about. I think you could throw out some Trevor Lawrence doubles this week, but I love the Jags. You guys have any thoughts on this one?
I like that thought. I mean, I think Ridley's been very expensive in the preseason stuff, and there's so much optimism that he is going to be this, massive target earner. But, is he really the guy from 2 years ago? If he is, though, I think he's going to smash in this spot. This does strike me as one of those teams where you would want to play, even if they blow out their opponent, they could still put up a lot through the air.
Mm-hmm.
And, the Colts, I don't think are going to be pushing the Jaguars, but the Jaguars, especially as Lawrence takes another step forward this year, I think are going to lean on their passing game as the real engine of their offense. So if they're putting up a bunch of points in this game, I do think most of them come through the air.
I was trying to backwards engineer it, but I get your point, TJ. Like, I was trying to go the rushing quarterback because the reports are Shane Steichen has been pulling plays out of high school and collegiate playbooks. Like, they're going to run the annexation of Puerto Rico on Sunday and no one will be shocked at all. And so if we're going to get like a 15 carry quarterback here at his salary, then Anthony Richardson makes sense. But your point is Trevor Lawrence has also the passing ceiling, which we don't think Anthony Richardson has, maybe even this year, not let alone week one. Thus, he's the guy with a rushing floor that we feel confident double stacking. I think the only way I can get back to running it back on the other side for Indy is hoping Zach Moss is ruled out. Zach Moss limited at practice on Wednesday, because at least we know in the 4 games, Deion Jackson logged over 40% of snaps for the Colts last year. He reached a double-digit target share in all of them. He averaged 15.5% of the team's targets. So at least like that'd be a sneaky way to get some pass catching upside, even if that means Anthony Richardson dumping it off a lot, as Trevor Lawrence is just shoving it down their throats from Chris Kirk and Calvin Ridley.
I do worry about Jackson, though, with Richardson. Like, I don't know about my PPR play with this running back who's going to be doing high school running plays. Like, it's just tough for me to see how he gets there on volume, and then, they're not going to be very efficient, obviously.
Do you have a receiver, if you played that stack, that you would play it with them?
On the Colts side?
Yeah.
I'm not playing a Colt this week.
Yeah, I don't think I'm playing.
Including Anthony Richardson.
Because even like we're going to be missing Jelani Woods, but even then, like, don't make me pick Mo Alley Cox or Colin Granson. Yeah.
And I've to be fair, I've been on the fade Anthony Richardson preseason train, so I'm probably going to get smoked there in season long at best ball, but might as well just ride that prior out in week 1.
I'm in on Anthony Richardson from the season long perspective, but I don't, if you're going to get a chance to take the lower owned guy who's probably going to score more points, his offense is going to score more points for sure. I'm definitely more interested in the Lawrence side. Alec Pierce is someone I've been mixing in best ball, but I don't know if I would want to go there in DFS. In best ball, I have the whole season for him to
exactly. Yeah, it's hard to touch an Alec Pierce when you got access to every player in the league on the slate. Before we get into our favorite plays at each position, week 1 is in theory the softest week of the year. Definitely have the craziest pricing of the year. Should have the biggest and softest player pool. Any general thoughts on the slate, or just playing in week 1 in general, Daigle?
I think I kind of hit on it at the top of the show, where we are definitely looking at more cumulative ownership this week, since prices are the softest they'll ever be since they were laid out a month ago. So just be more willing whenever you're looking at, whether you're looking at the solver with us or you're looking at our articles on the site Friday, Saturday morning, just be willing to eat more chalk this week, and then try to bounce back with probably 2 or 3 plays roughly in the 5 to 10% range is what I'm looking at just for week 1.
Crane, how are you approaching week 1?
Yeah, I would say in general, like you want to, like we've spent months and months and months, like kind of figuring out what we think is going to happen, and ultimately feeling very strongly that the season is going to play out in certain ways for certain teams. But like that can be correct, and week one can still look different than that, right? Like I don't have much Alexander Mattison at all in best ball or managed, but like that's because I don't think his whole season is going to turn out very well for where he was priced in those drafts. It has nothing to do really with week one. Yeah. And so being able to go, you know what, zooming out, week one, Mattison seems kind of interesting. Joe Mixon in week one seems kind of interesting. Those are guys I'm not really on a season long, but I think not letting your season long takes dictate who you play in week one is important. I'm going to be interested in both those guys, actually.
Yeah, just piggybacking off what you guys said. I mean, we DFS and football in general, there's so much information overload. There's so it's so hard to find an edge that everyone else isn't aware of. In week one, we're going to get the most wrong, whether it be about player volume, ownership, all of those things. So lean into the variance of week one. If you have some spots that you're very confident in and it's going against the grain, that's probably an edge. Even if you aren't hearing anybody else, even if you aren't hearing us talking about it, lean into that in week one. It's the best time to do it. And then just from a macro DFS perspective, like this is a humongous slate. It's rare we're going to get slates this big throughout the season. A lot of chalk in the late window. Take advantage of late swap. It's always going to be the biggest advantage in DFS. And if you don't want to play multiple slates, I talked about this on last week's pod. I talk about it all the time when we have these big, especially the early only slates. You're going to get some really good opportunities to play some players that just aren't going to get you on the full slate. And I think this is a great week to do it with so much ownership probably going to that Miami LA game. Play an early only slate and you'll get to play some plays that you wouldn't otherwise. Getting into our favorite picks of the week, I want to start with PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports made easy. You can go to prizepicks.com/DFSMVP and use the code DFSMVP for a first deposit match up to $100. We've been playing PrizePicks already. It's really great getting in on PrizePicks early in the week because we can compare those projections to 4for4 projections and find a really big edge. If you logged into PrizePicks today, you'll notice that they have Dak Prescott at 0.5 passing yards. So we could take more Dak Prescott passing yards. We saw Desmond Ridder projecting for 200.5 passing yards on PrizePicks. We have him projected well below that on 4for4, one of the biggest rushing offenses in the league for the Falcons. So less than 200 passing yards for Desmond Ridder. And Stephon Diggs at 69.5 receiving yards on PrizePicks. 4for4 is projecting Stephon Diggs near 100 yards. So that looks like one of the biggest edges of the week, taking Stephon Diggs for more than 69.5 passing yards. With those three picks, you can 5x your money. We threw in a $20 we threw in $20 pick on that for that 3-player pick'em. So don't forget to go to prizepicks.com/DFSMVP. Use the code DFSMVP for a deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports made easy.
If you don't want to wait till Sunday, though, just know I would pop in that Dak Prescott over a half passing yard bonus with David Montgomery over 52 rushing yards. The secret to Chris Jones, everyone looks at his pass rushing prowess, but last year the Chiefs were above average in run stopping whenever Chris Jones is on the field. And that month that he was absent, they went to bottom 5 in yards per carry allowed to opposing running backs. So I think it's actually going to be a big David Montgomery week quietly for the Lions.
Oh, we got Matt Savoca on Showdown ownership coming up tomorrow with his Showdown article. But yeah, David Montgomery grinding that game into points oblivion with possibly no Travis Kelce. Yeah, I like that call a lot. Going back to old school DFS MVP style, we're going to go through each position, talk about our favorite plays at each position. We'll go a little bit rapid fire here. I'll let Pat and Daigle give their favorite plays from any angle they like, whether it be value or a GPP angle. I will talk about my favorite cash game plays at each position. Pat, what quarterback do you like this week?
Unfortunately, it's Deshaun Watson. I think it's just kind of, you get that game environment that could be really good, but it's not going to be the one everyone wants to go to. You're going to have an offense that's going to be able to push him on the other side. You have, I think, an offense that needs to prove that they can be built around the pass. These coaches, I think, are going to be really motivated not to kind of be the Browns of old. And as we talked about, there are some kind of obvious stacking partners, with Moore probably being the chalky one. We can pivot away from that. Go to Njoku, get tight end taken care of, go to Amari Cooper. So there's just kind of a really easy, natural double stack candidate with good bringbacks. You have to eat a little bit of chalk on the bringback side, but you're getting away from the much chalkier Chargers game. So does strike me as one that's probably going to come in a bit less owned than it should be. So I'm definitely going to be doing this in some of my small field stuff.
Yeah, me and you're going to have fun. You're going to be riding that game. I'm going to be riding the Jaguars, and then we're both just going to have to watch all of the Dolphins and Chargers just start passing us on the leaderboard on the late slate. The best way to play DFS is to get that early morning screenshot and just have it disappear to no cash. I'm so excited about it. Daigle, tell me why I'm absolutely wrong about the Colts and Anthony Richardson.
I don't know if you're wrong, and I'm still trying to figure out how to play it, but I do think Anthony Richardson is somewhat unique on this slate. The reason I would fade him is not because I don't think he's going to have 12 carries. I think he's going to have a ton of carries here, and even having him naked in lineups would be fine, honestly. It'd be enough to get me by and then just pay up for everyone else. The issue is why I may or may not play him is because we don't need the salary savings. That's just it. So whether I go to Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, Jalen Hurts, even I may not even need a pay down in that 5K range for Anthony Richardson. That would be the reason I don't play him. I just want to put him on everyone's radar because I do think him being naked is totally fine in my lineups.
Yeah, for me, Sam Howell and cash, especially on DK down at 4,900. FanDuel usually fits a little bit better to pay up for quarterbacks a little bit easier. So Lamar Jackson makes sense there. But Sam Howell down at 4,900 on DK against Arizona, favored by 7. I'm trying to get the moniker Rich Trubisky going for Sam Howell, but it hasn't caught on yet. So if you guys could pump that up, that'd be great. He's our top 4-for-4 value on DraftKings, and he's one of 5 quarterbacks on the main slate that 4-for-4 is projecting for at least 30 rush yards, but 3 of those other quarterbacks are high-priced guys. So the only really 2 rushing quarterbacks we're getting value on are Sam Howell and Anthony Richardson, but you're getting Sam Howell for $700 less than Richardson. So he'll probably be my cash game quarterback there. At running back, a game we haven't talked about much, and I think a game that's a pretty interesting spot. Daigle, tell us your running back.
I came into the week thinking maybe I can squeeze Tannehill into a million maker lineup. I still might, by the way, because I think the target share will be concerted between DeAndre Hopkins and Treylon Burks. But either way, with Kendry Miller questionable to doubtful DNP on Wednesday, there's nowhere for running back touches to go with Alvin Kamara suspended than Jamaal Williams. And that's why when everyone, you hear other shows and they talk about, play J.K. Dobbins no matter what. We talked about it with bigger picture context, because where are you fitting J.K. Dobbins? If 25% of the field is playing J.K. Dobbins, what else do we do with Austin Eckler, Jamaal Williams? These cash game plays, honestly. And there are more beyond that. So Jamaal Williams, 25 touch running back if Kendry Miller's rolled out, because all that's behind him on the active roster is literally Kirk Merritt, who no one could pick out of a lineup. So yes, play Jamaal Williams in a favorable game script indoors.
Yeah, surprised Jamaal Williams isn't getting more attention. I think once people, especially when people start building cash lineups, I think they'll see that Jamaal actually fits in quite nicely to there. So I think he can end up being popular. Our boy Brian over at BetSports was asking about this game earlier. If Jamaal does get popular, I actually do like Chris Olave as a pivot against a Tennessee defense that was a pass funnel last year. But Jamaal, I think, is going to end up being a cash game play by Sunday.
Fun ambiguity from Tennessee's offense, too, because maybe this is Mike Vrabel trickle down and nothing matters. They're still not going to pump it into gear. But they did fire Todd Downing from last year's OC and hired Tim Kelly. Last year's offense finished dead last in pace and 29th in pass play rate from neutral game script. Again, maybe it's just a Mike Vrabel offense, but also adding DeAndre Hopkins to the mix and having a new OC could lead to something different, could lead to more fun indoors. So either way, I would play Jamaal Williams.
Pat, your running back, I think, is probably the best team pivot on the slate.
Yeah, Raheem Mostert. We talked about it earlier, but I do like when I can get into these game environments that everyone else wants to be involved in because they're fun, high-scoring, good game environments that we should be targeting. But I can get there with a player that people don't seem to be that interested in playing. And Mostert, maybe he gets steamy, but the early stuff is, he seems like he's coming in pretty low. So I would be one where if he looks like he's going to catch a ton of ownership, I'll find another play. But nice pivot for where we're sitting right here.
I kind of think Mostert is like the better play in a vacuum over J.K. Dobbins anyways. Like, doesn't Mostert have more pass catching equity? He was being used as the team's third down back in training camp even before Jeff Wilson got injured.
Yeah, and I mean, like, everything you would say about Mostert, like why you wouldn't want to play him, is, I think
irrelevant to week one.
31-year-old coming off a knee injury. Or not knee injury, but has dealt with knee injuries over the course of his career. But it's week one. This is the
healthiest. He's the healthiest he will be all year right now.
We can confidently say that.
And A-Chain is at the least threatening that he will be
all year
this week. Yeah.
I'm riding Alexander Mattison, 7,300 FanDuel, 6,500 DK. As Daigle just talked about, I think he's more cash viable than Dobbins at basically the same salary. I think people probably end up playing Mixon over him in cash. I think if you play both of them together, just kind of depends on if you feel like you have to have Eckler in your lineup or not. But I will be having Mattison in quite a bit of my lineups. And if he ends up being relatively loaned, he might be my most popular tournament play of the week. We'll kind of see how ownership plays out there. We talked about this wide receiver already, and this is actually Pat's favorite wide receiver of the week, even though Daigle loved him earlier.
Yeah, Davante Adams. But for all the reasons Daigle said, like, you're getting a chance to get Davante Adams. It's super low ownership on a slate where we are gonna need some wide receiver points. We're gonna, we've got the elite wide receivers that are going to be popular and good spots. And, I guess Tyreek Hill could fail, but I don't think he's going to bomb. So, like, who can I match? Who's got a ceiling that's going to come in low owned that can actually surpass what Tyreek Hill can do? And like Davante Adams did this last year, we were there were a lot of doubters that he would be the same Davante Adams when he played with Derek Carr instead of Aaron Rodgers. He had 2.45 yards per route run, which is awesome. Anything over 2 is really strong. And he hasn't had a yards per route run below 2 since 2017. like he's amazing. And he showed no signs of falling off last year. I understand that Jimmy Garoppolo could be an issue, but like the market is basically going to pay me to like go find out if Jimmy Garoppolo can ruin Davante Adams. And I'm willing to go find out.
Yeah, as Daigle talked about earlier, as we talked about with the possible ownership percentage on there, I think that's one that we're going to have to think about quite a bit, especially if a player at basically the same salary is going to be 30% owned. Going into week one, there are a lot of rookie wide receivers that are viable, that are really good spots. Daigle, tell me one that no one's talking about.
I kind of hope Christian Watson, who was DMP on Wednesday, plays, because I'm still willing to play Jayden Reed over the field. The target tree in Green Bay was ambiguous. Let's start there. We now have Jordan Love, no more Aaron Rodgers. We have no idea how this thing is going to shake out. But we do know Jayden Reed, not only higher draft capital, number 50 overall pick compared to Romeo Doubs, 4th rounder, but also Jayden Reed and 4 seasons across Western Michigan and Michigan State, at least a 20% target share in all 4 seasons. All the guy does is play bigger than his size and earn targets. In the preseason, they were using him on jet sweeps, just like he received 20 carries in college, and on concerted targets, as well as getting him involved downfield. So Marvin Mims, you're about to discuss, and is an amazing play. Marvin Mims is also going to come in 2 or 3x Jayden Reed's ownership. And of course, the Packers are playing what was the league's worst defense, allowed a league high points per game. The Bears did when they traded Roquan Smith over the second half of the year. So I think it's a great spot for Jayden Reed.
Yeah, as long as Jerry Jeudy is out in this game, I mean, Marvin Mims is probably going to be a pretty clear cash game play for all of us, especially on DraftKings. If you're trying to do something like fit Justin Jefferson and Austin Eckler together, combos like Marvin Mims and Sam Howell are going to let you do that. Raiders were just one of the worst defenses across the board last year, as Corain mentioned earlier. We currently have Mims as a top 3 wide receiver value on DraftKings at 4 for 4. He's our best sub 5K wide receiver value on FanDuel. FanDuel. So he is the salary saver in cash games. In tournaments, yeah, he will get steamed. He'll probably be top 5 ownership, like Daigle said. So keep that in mind there.
If Watson doesn't play, do you think that Reed can kind of shift some of that ownership away from Mims, or do you guys see Mims just being the clear play for people?
I don't think people touch Green Bay much this week, regardless.
I don't think so either. I need to play
I think maybe
around.
it goes to my tight end play if it happens.
I need to play around with it and see what people can afford if they go both Mims and Reed. That's kind of the question is, does it lead to an obvious stack like just overblowing on Chargers and Dolphins? Does it make it that much easier since everyone's cheap? I think that's kind of the question we're waiting for.
We talked about Cooper Kupp being out. Daigle, your favorite tight end of the week?
Last year with Cooper Kupp off the field, Tyler Higbee led the team with a 24.7% target share. Sometimes it's that simple. He won't get yards after the catch, but it doesn't matter when you get 20 PPR points because you have 20 catches for 21 yards. So Tyler Higbee, if you're going to spend up a tight end this week, pretty much the highest floor of anyone.
We didn't bring up the Raiders Broncos game as one listed. It ends up being one of the games we've talked about the most on here. So Pat, tight end.
We're on it. Yeah, we're on it. For sure.
Yeah. Dulcich. I think Dulcich is pretty interesting. Again, like they talked about it in kind of this Joker role, and I'm wondering if he can maybe be kind of like Jared Cook was for the Saints, where he didn't run all the routes, but was like clearly out there to stretch the field and be kind of a big wide receiver, like down the seam, that kind of stuff. I thought Dulcich had a pretty good rookie season. I thought he was a good prospect. I've obviously been disappointed that he looks like he's going to be in a part-time role, but that part-time role could be more extensive this week than it ends up being for much of the rest of the year, just given the injuries to the wide receivers. So I think if you're going to play Dulcich ever, this would be the week.
And it's the part-time role we want. Like it's a part-time pass catcher. Good. Get out there on third down. That's all I care about. You're running routes.
Yeah, 5,300 FanDuel, 4K on DraftKings. Again, kind of in that salary range that I don't think a ton of people will touch, especially because we kind of talked about that Packers game. I think one of the biggest cash game plays of the week, especially on DraftKings, could be Luke Musgrave, especially if Christian Watson is out, at 2,900 on DK, 4,500 FanDuel. We just don't really have an obvious punt on DraftKings. On FanDuel, you probably don't have to go this far in cash, but punting tight end in DraftKings cash is something that we love to do. We have him as a top 2 value on DraftKings at 4 for 4. Yeah. I mean, Pat, who's your defense?
So this defense I don't even love, but I think it's nice because of the pricing on DK lets you do just a straight pivot from the Commanders. So if you're building a team and you're like, hey, look, the Commanders fit, I guess I'm just going to eat the 35% chalk and play. Don't just play the Packers. Okay, it's not nearly as fun. I like it. But Justin Fields is going to take sacks, right? They might throw a little bit more, which is good. We want pass attempts against our defense. Yeah. But the big thing is they're a totally fine option, and you can play them instead of the Commanders. I just would not be fitting the Commanders in, even if you're like, oh, the salary's perfect.
Yeah, I like that call a lot. Love the pivot. Packers are underdogs, but it's only a 1.5 point spread, and I think it's fine. Those slight underdogs are always pretty decent plays. Daigle?
Pat already hinted at it, but I think I would play the Seahawks defense and pay up for them, given the offensive line issues the Rams are also going through. Just lost one of their starting offensive linemen about a week ago, too. So lots of things going on, especially without Cooper Kupp. This offense we expect to be dropping back and passing often. So at least we have a high sack floor, we think, for Seattle's defense. Maybe get some more picks as well. And a quick bonus, if you're not going to play the Colts, TJ, I do think the Jaguars are kind of sneaky live that everyone's going to go overlooked. Not only, again, a sack-based floor here with Anthony Richardson as a rushing quarterback, but also like only 9 dropbacks in the preseason. But we were all worried about Anthony Richardson transitioning. Like, how long is it going to take him just to learn football? only 455 career dropbacks in college. He just needs to play more. I'm not saying he's going to be a bad player. He just has to get more reps. And like on 9 dropbacks in the preseason, that dude went 1 of 8 for 8 yards and a pick under pressure. He completed 14% of his passes. So like there's a lot that can go wrong for the Colts offense. So Jaguars defense absolutely live.
One of my biggest weaknesses is I get more happy when my fades fail than when my flag plants hit. So I'm happy to hear you say all that because I love to see the torture and I'm all over the Jaguars this week. If you've been paying any attention, you know the cash game defense of the week is going to be the Commanders, especially on DraftKings, down at 2,900 as a 7-point favorite against arguably the worst team in the league. So yeah, in cash games, just play them. We're not worried about ownership in cash games. Play the Commanders, but know that they're going to be everywhere in tournaments. All right, boys, that does it for the Week 1 DFS MVP podcast. Again, just a reminder, the show is earlier than usual because these dudes are about to go make all the money in Vegas for the Week 2 and the rest of the season. We will be back here on Fridays at 6 p.m. Eastern time. If you are listening on your favorite podcast platform, please give us a 5-star rating or review. It is the easiest way to support what we do. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, please subscribe, and check out the links in the description for a hookup on DFS subscriptions, 25% off with the promo code YouTube. And once you sign up for that, make sure you upgrade to that solver package. It takes the 4for4 DFS projections to another level. We're really excited to be partnering with them, so make sure you click on that link. Pat, over at Legendary Upside, rocking it hard over there. Remind everyone what you got going on.
Yeah, legendaryupside.com. If you sign up, I still have some $50 underdog credits for people who sign up for the yearly subscription over there. And a lot of really strong preseason content, best ball rankings, all of that. But the in-season coverage will be there for you every week as well, doing this game-by-game preview called The Walkthrough.
Follow us all on X/Twitter. Pat is at Pat Corain, Legendary Upside at Legendary Upside, John Daigle at Not J Daigle. 4for4 is at 4for4 Football. I'm at TJ Hernandez. We'll talk to you guys Sunday morning in the Discord.